Covered it all, too.
They're small boats, so it's not many people that can fit in those boats, but nonetheless, they're just slowly but surely bringing them to higher ground as well. And this is a live look at the radar right now, and so we are still seeing some rain out there as these waterways, really in most cases, continue to expand. If you live near any sort of watershed, a bayou, a creek, at this point a stream, I think, a river, what have you, all of them are out of their banks right now and in downright dangerous conditions.
So that was just an example of what people in Houston saw on TV during Hurricane Harvey. Many of the people in Houston waited on bated breath to see what was going to happen and if the water was going to come into their homes. So this is part 2 of Overcoming Harvey. Adrian and I continue our discussion about what to do when floodwaters come to your homes. We talk about volunteers, we talk about contractors, we talk about getting financial assistance, which, as Adrian explains in this episode, it takes a lot longer than a lot of people anticipate or expect. So, pretty interesting stuff. So let's continue. Volunteers, who should we be talking to? And your experience with...
Yes, so the after the first flood, and not so much the second flood, there was an army of volunteers that descended into the area. You're going to want to keep an eye out and look for official designated individuals, either from the city, from the state, FEMA, Red Cross, those sorts of... keep an eye out for those people. You'll want to touch base at least with them to see what support that they can offer. As far as the other volunteers, depending on your level of comfort, you may just want to engage volunteers, people in the streets, to see what can they provide for you. Usually it's going to be in those early days of getting big furniture out of the house, moving items away, maybe perhaps some minor demolition on that. Again, understand that they're not contractors and they're not skilled people, so you may have to watch them and guide them on the procedures that you need for them to do. But they're very helpful. They want to help, but I understand they're not skilled labor, so you may end up finding yourself being more of a administrator or a guidance person and doing less actual work while they're there. You want to maximize their time there, because they're going to be there for perhaps 4 hours, 5 hours, 3 hours. You don't know. So while you have volunteers in your house or in your garage or helping out, try to utilize them as best you can to make the most impact. What you don't want to do is have volunteers staying around, because what they'll do is they'll just go find somewhere else to help out with someone. Right. So when you have them there, utilize them as best they can, and just keep an eye on, make sure that they are safe as well, that they're not risking themselves, because you don't want that liability. Plus, you don't want that on your conscience, that they're helping you out and they get injured on the job as well.
Oh, yeah. Contractors, who should we be talking to, who should not be talking to?
Yes, so there will inevitably be a wave of contractors that are coming in from outside your area, your immediate area, to come in and do work. I had the benefit of being able to have 3 contractors that we had done some work with in the past, and we were able to get on their schedules. Granted, it was several weeks, almost a month in one case, before we could get that person on hand, but we did hear later on that there were incidents where contractors had come in and done either half work, shoddy work, or no work, and simply disappeared. So that is, without knowing these individuals, they're going to want to come in and in essence get on your calendar, get those checks written, get the cash changing hands. You'll want to avoid that. That is something that you're going to want to really be aware of, that it can happen. It does happen more often than it should. So that's not to say all the contractors are like that. There were actually several contractors that had come in from Dallas and Fort Worth area that stayed until the job was done, and it was done right. So there are some good stories for that, but it is something that you do need to be very aware of. If you can, try to get multiple contractors that are available, take a look at and give you some numbers, and make sure that they try to do as best you can to make sure they have some responsibility to your job that you're going to have for them.
Because I would think like your natural inclination is just like, let's get it done. Let's just,
right. You want to. I just want
to get back to normal.
Yeah, you do want to fight that urge, especially if you're in your mind, the contractor is going to do soup to nuts. In essence, the demolition, the cleaning, and the rebuilding. Some contractors will do that, but some of them will not. They will do one or two of those things, and so you need to try to get those expectations set, and try to resist that urge just to pay someone to do everything. Again, it's a very stressful situation. There's that temptation, but you have to fight that temptation because ultimately the contractor is going to do their work and then go somewhere else. You're the one's going to have to stay in that house and live in that house, so you want to get it done right and get it done right the first time, even if it takes a little bit longer to get that done.
And don't sign anything up front.
Don't sign anything up front. Don't put yourself in any sort of legal obligation up front. The first 24 hours is going to be the most stressful emotionally because you just don't know. You think the worst. A lot of that goes away when you actually see the damage, and then you go into that second phase of where just getting over that shock of now you know what's going on, now you know the situation, and it seems like a very daunting task. So you're gonna experience those in those first few days. I found it easier to deal with it by actually getting down to work and actually doing something with my hands.
Yeah.
And I'm not a very physical person, but I do know how to pull sheetrock. I do know how to pull carpet, and it's just.
Let's talk about that a little bit. I just so sorry to interrupt, but you had mentioned in the side conversations, like if the water got up to a certain point, you're okay, but if it got above the electrical, you wanted to go up 4 feet. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
So for those first few days, we realized that while the house had gotten 3.5 feet of water outside, the actual inside of the house, because it was a newer house, we had gotten 3.5 to maybe 4 inches of water. So the first thing I realized was if it now it had sat for some time, so the sheetrock and the insulation had wicked it up. But for the most part, if you haven't gotten water up to the first outlet, which most outlets should be in America, 12 inches from the ground floor, it basically, if you have less than that, you can probably get by at least initially with the demolition of those first 12 inches. Again, because we had water basically sitting overnight for some time and had wicked up, we went ahead and did the first 3 feet of sheetrock, 3 feet of insulation. Basically wanted to expose that. And later on, as we realized, well, if you're 3 feet, you might as well go ahead and go to that first 4 feet, as most houses have that first 4 feet is that one panel of sheetrock. Went ahead and go ahead and pull that out.
Okay, I got you.
So that you have those nice clean lines.
Right.
Makes it easier to work with sheetrock. You're not having to cut and, weird shapes and whatnot.
Right.
We were at 3 feet at pulling, and again we figured out might as well just go that last foot and get a nice clean line all around.
Make it easier to tape and float later on. Right.
Tape and float, and same thing with the insulation. Would make it easier to work with insulation when you can work with 4 feet of insulation versus having to cut 1 inch,
3 feet here,
3 feet
1 foot there. Yeah. Okay.
So that was our thinking through. With that first flood, the second flood where we only got about 1.5 inches of water in the house of mud and water, and that was the other thing too. Is the first inch was mud, and then the other rest of it was water. Again, it had wicked up in there, but not as much as the first flood, and so we were able to get by with. I think we actually ended up just cutting 2 feet, but in each case, the water did not get up to the electrical. Now, if it does get up to the electrical, and that was our concern, was that you'll need to then have an electrician come in and verify that all the outlets that perhaps were submerged be revisited.
Gotcha.
And we had, at the time, my in-laws lived 1 street over, and they had an older house, which, again, let a lot more water in. So they actually got the full 4 feet of water in the house. It matched the outside. So that destroyed their refrigerator, their appliances. Of course, all the electrical had to be redone at the floor level because it all had mud inside. They pull open the electrical plug and there's mud inside.
Sure, yeah.
So
makes sense.
all that had to be redone.
Yeah.
For them. So they went the full 4 feet of sheetrock and also had to redo the electrical for all those, and of course the appliances, and even some plumbing. There was some plumbing issues that were the force of the water pushed sewage water up from their toilet.
Oh, that makes sense, right?
So they had to be very cognizant of procedures to protect yourself now from sewage water.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people in the neighborhood were in that same situation again, older houses and whatnot. We were lucky in contrast to that. But yeah.
Yeah. Good story.